Hello, everyone. I'm Monica, the Creative Beast, and I want to say thank you so much for tuning into my channel today. I am doing another art book flip through, and this is a book that I made for the Are You Book Enough Challenge last year in May 2018. The theme was secret, and I decided I would do a book on the idea of an open secret, as in it's an open secret that there are certain people in my life I don't like, kind of open secret. So this is a book, and you will find that this is one of a few books that I've made in my life that tend to work out some of my personal upset, angst, anger, resentment, and this book is definitely one of them. So let me go ahead and start to show you what this book looks like. And I constructed the whole book. I made this little box and the contents that are inside. So let's go ahead and focus on the book. So this is called Open Secret. Case studies of selfishness, manipulation, and traumatic cruelty of the toxic negative personality. Case studies include techniques for clearing pain caused by the toxic negative personality. When I shared this book last year during the challenge, people really enjoyed it. And it seems I'm not alone in suffering at the hands of the toxic negative personality. So people got a kick out of this book. And this is definitely an art book because it's not a traditional book. But I would say that there are, you could say that there are chapters in this book, the way I've constructed it. So this is a box that I built from scratch with a little help from the computer. I created the text. I did some measurements for the contents inside the book and measured everything else. It took about 2 pieces of cardstock because I had to glue the lid into this box. So you'll see where the lid has, actually it's just the flap of the lid has been glued in here, and I've lightly penciled in Are You Book Enough Challenge, May 2018, Secret. And I'll do some final lettering of that soon. Otherwise, I could put a full book colophon on the back here if I wanted to. And I'm sure I've talked about a colophon. It's usually a bit of information on what goes into the book, the kind of font that's used, the date, how many have been made when it's an art book or a special limited edition publication. So the contents are recycled materials. So let me just pull this last little envelope or chapter out. This is empty, but these are some recycled cereal bags that I cut and assembled to make these envelopes, and I cut them so that the top of the bag would be part of the envelope flap, and I used some double stick tape to seal them. I used a stencil and some Sharpie markers to do the lettering on each one so it would all be fairly uniform. And I was working with, some fonts and the stencils, so it would sort of look kind of scientific, medical, professional, case study kind of look. I think I accomplished that. I'm not entirely sure. But there are 9 envelopes, and some of them are already filled. So we have case study number 1, case study number 2, case study number 3, case study number 4. Okay, and this is actually the beginnings of some more case studies. There are some pages that are prepped, and I'll show you in what way they've been prepped. So let me go ahead and put that in there this way. And let me choose, let's see, 3 is the magic number. Let's take a look at number 3. Okay, so we'll put these back in here that way. So there's case number 3. I do not use any real names in any way. What I've done Okay, since there's no ceiling on this one, this might be a case in progress. So let's double check that. Let's see. No, there's a graph. And okay, so this seems to be a case study that is somewhat completed. I just didn't use any tape to seal, and I'll share some of that when I'm finished going through these. So this is case number 3. I did not use any names in these case studies. That is to protect the not so innocent. And I used some techniques that I learned when I studied to become a grief recovery specialist. We are taught how to go through the process, and some of that process includes a relationship graph. And I think this goes this way, because I was working on a lot of these case studies and letters. There's also a letter component as part of the process for grief recovery. We go through the relationship graph starting from the day upon meeting in the relationship. No matter who that other person is, even if it's your parents, there's a day that you met them when you were born. But of course, you don't really get to know them until you become a little more conscious and memorize and have, some mental brain capacity as you get older. So the relationship graph begins from the day you start until the day the relationship ends, whether it ends because of a breakup, a divorce, a death, or a break off. And the way the relationship graph works is this is your middle point going across here. Any highlights go above the line and any low points go below the line. So as we can see from the starting, there were no really great starting points, and not long after there's a not so great point. There's a middling upper above, there's more not so great stuff. So yeah, this was not a great relationship. And another part of the grief recovery process is writing a letter. So this was a letter written on 2 sides, and I guess I just kept an extra sheet because sometimes we have an addendum if we feel that going through the process has not been fully completed. And in the grief recovery process, we do not use the phrase closure. There is no such thing as closing a relationship. What we do is we complete the relationship. We complete it at our end because the person is generally no longer around or in our lives one way or another to complete the relationship. So we do not say closure, we say complete, because sometimes we are doing this process with people who are still living, and it's actually very helpful. We are taught what forgiveness really means. We are taught to take responsibility for at least 1% of our feelings, and it's an amazingly helpful process. So let's see this one. Okay, so case number 4 is definitely a finished case because it has black seal. But I just used some regular masking tape. I used black masking tape, so it would be easy to open these if I ever wanted to go back and refer to these case studies. Okay, so there's a graph, there's a letter, also both sides, and a little page extra just in case I need to do an addendum. Let's see. Oh, okay, so this is actually an interesting one because as you can see, this relationship began here, first encounter. There's a lot of really great positive points. There's a little low point there, no big deal. There's sort of an up and down just because it was a sort of mixed bag. Another slightly mixed bag. There's some good stuff. And again, more mixed bag because it's both up and down. So, and then I also started color coding here for some other issues. This is somebody I had worked with. And like I said, I didn't use real names. This was a nickname I gave this individual, Troublemaker. The time frame is a 4-year time frame. part of the process is that we think about the hopes, dreams, and expectations of the relationship, things that we go into the relationship hoping for. And that is part of the problem with some relationships when they don't work out, because we have these hopes, dreams, and expectations, and they don't work out, we become very disappointed. So that's part of the process also, is figuring out where we take responsibility for our part of the relationship. And we can also certainly learn to forgive ourselves when things go south, as it were. So that was case 4. And that is how this book essentially works. So it's case studies. And the people that were studied in these little packets are people that, you know, on the whole, most of the relationships started on a good note. And then they eventually went south, usually because they wound up being really toxic, selfish, manipulative, territorial, difficult. They just wound up being people who really did a number on my personal peace and well-being. So I started using the techniques from the grief recovery method to clear all that bad energy and either move forward with the relationship knowing who they were and believing it, as Maya Angelou has been known to say, or I clear the energy and end the relationship so I can have some peace of mind for myself. So that is the book. And this is one of many books that I have made to work out some unhappiness, misery, trauma caused by people that I've dealt with in my life. Some of the people in this book were kind of an impetus for me learning to trust my intuition and getting involved with some groups online so that I could learn how to strengthen my own intuition. So even though I'm not quite ready yet, I will eventually be thanking them for their craziness, because their craziness made me see that they weren't for me. It made me see that perhaps I had whispers telling me that they were not going to be for me, but I chose to ignore those whispers. And now I listen to my intuition a lot more often. So whenever I start to get a strange vibe from somebody, I'm just pleasant, I'm nice, I'm civil, and then I don't pursue them too much. Because life is too short to have it cluttered with miserable, toxic, unhappy people who are bent on making everybody else around them miserable. There's a great quote I came across recently, and it's this: people are at war with themselves, but they invariably wind up taking it out on you. And we don't need that in our lives now, do we? So that was Open Secret. I hope you enjoyed seeing the book. And there's another book that I made last year that also worked out some of my anger, resentment about people. And I will make a video about that book soon. That was made in, June last year, and it's called Boxed In. So be on the lookout for that. And I may make a little follow-up video to talk a little bit more about the grief recovery method, because it's a really wonderful method to help you move through your feelings of grief, to help you process all the feelings of grief for a relationship that has ended, whether it is through breakup, divorce, or death. Because at the heart of grief recovery, it is really about loss, not just death. And we have a lot of loss in our lives. And I don't think that we're really taught how to process a lot of that in our society. We're taught a lot of misconceptions, actually, and that's also part of my training. And it's something that gets covered if you go through the process yourself. So I may just do a follow-up video about the grief recovery method soon. But in the meantime, thank you so much for stopping by. Thanks for tuning into my channel, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.